There we go. Welcome everybody to the second episode of Butler's Babble. And sorry, I was trying to get things going over on this side and I missed when it was coming back on there. So hopefully we got some people on here watching us. I know we're going to. And just to give everybody a little brief overview of today's show, just a reminder, we are going through StreamYard. So if you have a chance and you want to comment or make any questions for Rob during the podcast today, you can do so just by typing in the chat there, and we will see your comments and we can ask Rob. But it is easier if you go to streamyard.com/Facebook and give them permission to use your name in this. And today, for the first time, we're actually streaming live to our YouTube channel also. And I was just checking to make sure it was all streaming fine, and it looks like it is. So I think we're doing pretty well there. So that's a good thing. So hopefully everybody's watching, everybody's here. And I'm just going to give you a brief overview of our guest today. So my guest is a good friend of mine who I've known, I want to say probably now, Rob, about 14, 15 years now. I'm back in the 2008 area. And Rob lives up in Sudbury, Ontario, Canada, and a fantastic photographer, runs an amazing, successful photography business out of Sudbury. And we'll get into that a little bit later in the show. But instead of me telling you more about him, we're going to get him to tell you more about himself. So today's show, we're going to try to empower, motivate, inspire you to be the best that you can be. And no matter how down you've been in the past, we're going to show you that you can always turn it around and be successful. And Rob's one of those people that can prove that to you. So he smiles, but he knows it's true. So today I would like to welcome Robert Provencher. Welcome to the show, Robert.
Great to be here, Johnny. Glad to see you. Everyone else? Anyone else?
And Rob, you're on the other side this time. Usually you're on my chair interviewing other people, and here you are on the other side now. So you got to get used to that.
Well, you caught the fire, John, and it's obviously something you're very passionate about doing, and you're dedicating to this new adventure. And I'm real excited for you. So
no, thank you. I'm really loving doing these shows, and I hope everybody's loving watching them. And so why don't we get started? Why don't you give everybody a little bit of a history of who Rob is, where you grew up, give us family history, everything like that.
Get into my story.
Right into your story.
All right. So I was born on almost on the beaches of Blind River in 1958. It was July 26th. My mom went into labor and off she went to the hospital. And I was born at 8:15 that night. And my mom and dad met in Blind River, and I would have been the third. they had lost a child the year before in a car accident. It was a fatal car accident for them. My mom was 8 months pregnant. My dad lived, my mom lived, and I was the first after that, and 4 more girls came along. So I've got 4 younger sisters. So kind of grew up in Blind River for 3.5 years, and then we moved to Sudbury. And so most of my life is involves Sudbury, Ontario. And my whole family moved out of Sudbury in the last 25 years to London, Ontario, and Ottawa area. So I like it up here. As you know, John, you live in the north too, and it's a beautiful, beautiful country, smaller communities, lots of friendly people, friendly faces. It's a glorious place to be. So I'm still here, and no intention of leaving anytime soon, other than maybe visiting Costa Rica more and more. So I grew up.
You'll probably get into that a little bit more, but I bet you would love
sure
to live there full time.
So I grew up. We were poor, you know. My dad. I don't know what my dad's problem was, but he had a real poverty mentality. We always rented. If I could show you a picture, I probably have it somewhere. I ran a webinar once on prosperity, and I showed the 4-plex stucco that we were living in. It was so gungy. And 2 bedrooms, and I was 4 till about the age of 7 when we were living there, and it was just the start of my criminal career, so to speak. I started acting out at the age of 5, fire, stealing stuff, and general all-around vandalism. So I was a bit of a misfit and a miscreant from a very early age. Some point in time, my mom told me years later, she said she brought me to a social worker type person. I was like, what's wrong with my boy? She was trying to figure that one out. I was, my mom and dad were very, very, very Catholic. So I know my mom was praying for me quite a bit. However, she probably needed to step outside that and do a little bit more. And my dad especially, because the social worker said, He's just looking for his dad's attention. And, that's a large part of the reasoning behind a lot of misbehaviors with a lot of male youth. That's why they join gangs and get into general, trouble, because there's something missing in their life. So, and that behavior carried on like consistently, nonstop, and in school, outside of school. As I got older, I got more creative, and then I eventually ramped it up when I was 16. So two things happened when I was 16. I had a picture when I was 16, but I couldn't find it. I wanted to show it to you. I was such a scrawny looking kid, long hair, and just trouble through and through. But what happened on my 16th birthday, I had my first drunk, and I just took to alcohol like right away. It was like, wow, this is amazing. So that became the new motivation for getting into trouble. Now, getting into trouble meant, on top of everything else I was doing, if I was vandalizing or breaking into cars, I started breaking into houses and stores and what have you in order to acquire booze. So, that was a problem. That was a problem with me. And school, the whole time I was half asleep in school. Teachers always complained to my parents saying he's smart, he just doesn't try. And they tell me that, like, I didn't know what that meant. I had no clue what that meant. So I would underscore my entire youth, pretty much right through my 20s, as being lost. Yeah. So no direction. And I can touch on that later. And I think that's one of the reasons why I like teaching others. And like what you had said earlier, John, before we started this interview, you said that you really like learning from people and asking questions. So a large part of that is in me as well. And I think a large part of the reason for that is because I was so lost, and there was such a big gaping hole in my soul, so to speak. So,
well, you said like you were getting in trouble even from 5, and I know you're saying in 16 is when you started doing the booze, you started doing the breaking in the cars and houses.
Yeah,
and most people will be like, well, was it a bad crowd that you were involved with?
No.
It's almost like you were the bad crowd. People were warning their kids about you. Because I look at this picture that you sent me earlier here, and
I was the bad crowd.
And right there, and I'm taking that's you right there.
Yeah, well, that's me. We're all dressed up, going out for probably.
So innocent.
We're going to church. I always looked innocent, but I was a troublemaker. I was a troublemaker. I was a cute kid, but very, very shy, by the way. But left to my own resources, which I was left to quite a bit, because my mom had her hands full, and my dad was never around. He was never around. And that house, by the way, is that's in Sudbury. It's out in New Sudbury. And it was, what do you call that? Subsidized housing.
Okay, yeah.
Like projects type of thing. And, you grow up in that, you don't really think about it. But later on in life, I'm like, well, why the hell did my dad at least buy a house or rent a house instead of going to a government funded house? It was just the weirdest thing. I was kind of scratching my head years later. But so anyways, I was in trouble. Yeah. And I was kind of the leader of the pack. And I always thought too, there I am, I'm 17 there. I always thought that if I would have been in a inner city or something, I would have really ramped it up. I would have joined the gang easy. I would have just fit right in, because I was looking to plug in somewhere. So when I was 16, I took the booze, I took to drugs, I took the rock and roll, loved rock and roll. I mean, albums probably really saved me in many ways, because I connected with music. There I am at 19. And so when I was 16, I got into trouble big time. 16 to 17 were really bad years for me. Started getting in trouble with the cops, because it's no longer child's play. And back then, at 16, when I was 16, I don't know, the law changed to 18, but when I was 16, you were an adult. There's no question about it. You were treated like an adult if you broke the law. They didn't have juvie court, at the age of 16, 17. Nowadays, they have that. So my first criminal offense was 6 weeks after getting my first drunk on, breaking into a house, which was the norm. and I got caught, and so B&E, and it was all in the pursuit of booze. So 16, and I got 3 more charges from the age of 16 to 17, and then I got kicked out of school in grade 11. So 16, you're in grade 10, right? So in grade 11.
Yep. Yeah, you graduated 17, so you probably would have been around that grade 10, grade 11 age there. Yeah. And for those that don't know, Sudbury's not a huge town, but it's not a small town either. It's kind of like a mid-size.
It's about 100,000. It's a mining community.
Yeah.
So I had my struggles, and I was very much lost. I didn't know who to talk to, what to do. I had nothing as far as any kind of support. So I'm not saying that in a negative sort of pity pot kind of way. I'm just saying it as that's what my reality was. It could have been much, much worse. Could have been much better, I suppose. It doesn't matter. I look back at my life, and have looked back at my life many, many times. Many, many times. I'm 63 now, going on 64 in about five or 6 weeks. I look at my life, and I think everything happened for a reason. And all of the experiences I had are what made me. And I think that's a really, really important message, that we have to take all of our adversities and take them and roll them into positives in some way, shape, or form. I think that's a really critical mindset that is important. Somehow I had that. And when I was I was kicked out of school when I was in grade 12.
Okay. So
from grade 10 to 11 to the first half of grade 12 were bad years for me. Constantly in court and kicked out of school, and kind of lost. And I actually got thrown in jail at one point in time. And that was a pretty dark period. That was about 2 months after I got kicked out of school. Got thrown in jail for a little stint. So I had the wherewithal somehow that spring, said, I'm going back. I have to go back to school. I don't know where that came from. Because again, nobody was guiding me. It just sort of, I can't. I had a job driving a delivery van until I totaled the van. Oh, it's worse than that, John. You don't want to know. It gets worse than that. I got fired from that job, not for totaling the van, but for doing something much worse. I'm not going to get into it. But it was pretty bad. So, but I remember driving the van. I can't do this. I got to go and re-register for school. And I did. So, and I did. And a couple things happened. I have to tell this story to sort of highlight some wooey stuff. And it's kind of weird. So I'm not a super religious guy. I'm trying to work that out. Okay. Just the thing, I've probably been so scarred emotionally insofar as religion is concerned. There's like this thick layer of resistance. But I always thought to myself, if there's a God showed up in my life 3 times. Okay. And that was the time I went to jail when I was 17. I was horribly, horribly lost, running with the wrong crowd, and kicked out of school. And I already had 3 or 4 criminal offenses, and I was completely lost. And my mom said that my uncle Jim, who lived out in British Columbia, needed somebody to drive for him for 3 months. So I got a job working for him for 3 months. That was when my life changed. So the fact that I got out of my environment, and that was a little godsend. He lost his license for drinking. Well, it was really kind of innocent. It was just, he had a couple of drinks after work on a Friday after work. It was very, very mild, and there was a spot check, and he got nailed. So he lost his license for 90 days, and he was stuck. So, and he's a very generous soul, and he wanted to help me out. So, no, he never knew my situation. I only told him that about 4 or 5 years ago. But he needed help, and he wanted to keep it in the family. So he brought me in, and I'm sure he didn't have a whole lot of fun having a 17-year-old punk ass kid in his life, but it saved me. It really, really saved me. Now, around 2009 or 2010, I wrote him a thank you letter. I said, thank you. Kind of late, but better late than never, right?
Exactly.
I don't know why I didn't think of it earlier, but I just wrote him a letter, and I said, I just want to say thank you. That changed my life. I'm not sure if you knew that, but you know it now. And he called me, and we had a nice little chat. So that was one event. And then when I went back to school that next September, the first day of school, I was in the cafeteria at lunchtime waiting for my badass buddies to show up because we're going to go outside and smoke some cigarettes, whatever else we can muster. Anyways, this guy's walking up towards me, and he's kind of geeky looking. He's redheaded with buck teeth and a little pimply and all, and he's all smiley. He sits in front of me, and he puts his hand out, and he goes, "Hi, my name is Jean-Marc. They call me Bo. That's my name. And I'm from Hanmer High, which is another high school. I just started here, and we became best friends." Now, he was an honor student. He was the captain of the basketball team, and he was a honor student. He won all kinds of awards at the end of the year. And I'm thinking to myself, I didn't think of it at the time. We became fast friends. And I thought of it later. I thought, man, that guy saved my life. Because I learned how to be a student through him. I observed, I watched, and nobody had ever shown me anything of that nature before. So I was a very, very mediocre student. That year, I was getting 90s just by having him in my life. And what the hell was a guy like that wanting to do with a guy like me? I mean, he was clean cut, honor student, and, the complete opposite of me.
He obviously saw something in you.
I don't know.
Sometimes people just have a sixth sense.
We became friends, and I was the best man at his wedding, and saved my life. So that's sort of these little nudges. Now, the third time, it was a story I was telling you earlier before we went live. I had somebody come by the studio, a younger man who I was chatting with, and I told him this story. This was the third time. So we were talking about, like, in my early 20s, I was having really, really bad panic attacks. And the way the panic attacks happened was I love photography. Can we go back to that for a second?
Sure.
I discovered photography when I was at the end of I went back to high school. I finished high school. I actually got decent marks. And I remember being in the hallway, and my sister pushed me in the guidance counselor room, and she said, "Go sign up for college." I didn't know any better. I didn't know any better. She came up to me. She goes, "Did you sign up for college?" I said, "No, what's college?" She goes, "Sign up." So I signed up for the only course that I was really qualified for, which was audiovisual technician. And they had
that course. I took that course too.
Yeah, there you go. Cheers to the AV tech of 76 or whatever year. I had one semester. I went for 45 minutes, I always say. But there was a photography program in there run by a real stern German guy called Carl Summerer. Everybody was afraid of him, but I respected him because of his ability to take photography, and it just captivated me, especially the darkroom. So I quit that, and I went to Fanshawe for one semester as well. And then I quit that, and then I worked for about a year and drank a lot of beer. And so I quit getting in trouble, but I'm doing lots of drinking still. That's still a thing with me. And so I decided photography was going to be my thing. And somehow, something. Oh yeah, I got a job in the darkroom for almost 2 years as a darkroom tech. Okay. Now, I was extremely shy. I was very socially awkward, very, very socially awkward. So I did that job, and it was very technical. And but I was always ambitious. I don't know where that came from. I always had a lot of ambition to want to push forward. And I'm so grateful for that, because I had so many relatives and friends my age who didn't have that, and I see it, and they just kind of went. I think it's so important to want to just keep pushing forward and to really conquer your fears. And in my early 20s, I had this cockiness where I'm going to go out there and market myself. And I got this job because of my marketing skills. I put together a killer resume, even though I was barely qualified, but I did a good job. And for the first 6 months, it was really hard because I was just learning it. And then the next 6 months, I mastered it. And then for the next 8 months, I just did it, and I was bored, and I applied for another job, and I got a job doing school photography. And the school photography job were the start of my panic attacks. So I was extremely shy, awkward. Really, I had a hard time, like, just even being on the phone with people. So, if we were walking out in the street at 3 a.m. and I was looking for trouble, I was a different person. But so I had this job I applied for. And the guy, he was a school photographer. He managed the whole area, territory. And he said, okay, come on over next Wednesday. We're going to do I'm going to set up the camera. I'm going to show you the lights. Got a couple, he has 3 daughters. They're little kids and they have some other friends in the neighborhood. We can do some practice shots. This is school photography, right? It's pretty easy stuff. It's like a factory job. So he sets them up and he's about to take pictures and he's about to ask me to take a picture. And I had to leave the room and I went up into the bathroom and I was having a panic attack. Have you ever had a panic attack? It's the worst thing ever. It's not an anxiety attack. It's way worse. It's like you're hanging off the edge of a cliff over the crashing boulders down below, like 200 feet below, but you're walking down the street. And that's the feeling of fear you have. It's just horrendous. Yeah. And that triggered that right then and there in my life. And so I don't know how we got through that day. He probably just said, whatever, don't worry about it. We'll get to it later. I don't know. It was pretty, like I was kind of technically adept and he wasn't worried about it. So the next week was the first day of school, and the first school that he starts with is very small to kind of break in the new guy, which is me. And it's a high school, so there's like 350 students. He could do it if he wanted by himself. Like we set up 2 cameras, and he's doing the color packages, which they're paid, and I'm doing the ID shots, which are free to the school, so the quality doesn't matter. They're mug shots. And the camera doesn't work. Now I'm really, really, really nervous. And I hardly slept like 2 hours that night. I was just so nervous about this job. Remember, I had a panic attack with little kids and the camera didn't work. So he says, okay, well, just sit behind me and watch me. So I'm watching him. And about an hour later, he says, come on over. You can do a couple ID shots for me. And I did a couple. And then I sat down. But then it was a short day. We were done right after lunch and we go home. You always have to go home and unload the film. And then he said, we're going to set up the camera and the lights to see what the problem was. Because there was a problem. My camera wasn't working. I mentioned that, right, Johnny?
Yes, you did say that.
Yeah, it wasn't working. It would not work at all. And he sets it up and boom, it's working. And it's fine. Like I worked for 4 years with this guy. And that camera never failed. So it was like, I don't know, was that a little help? Because that's how nervous I was, really.
Exactly.
I was scared. Could you imagine that? That first year was really brutal on me because I was so nervous. Imagine that, you're 2 months into this job and you go into a school and you got 18 4-year-olds coming in the gym and you're going to do a group shot and then individuals. And I'm dying inside. I'm so scared. It's so weird. So.
No, it's not the easiest. I mean, there's been times where I've been put in front of center of something like that. And the fear that goes through you, it's like, I remember in school, I was like that. I hated doing speeches in front of the class, or you had to read a poem in front of the class. And I was grade 6 and you stand there and you got all these eyes just watching you. And when you're young, I mean, that's terrifying. I can imagine. And you were doing this when you were in your 20s.
Yeah, it was how I earned my living at the time. So I never drank during the day, but I drank on the weekends a lot, and that was my relief. And I got through that period. And by the second year, I got a little bit of confidence. And then on the third year, I started my own studio. I had way more balls than brains. And I when I was working at the age of 20 in the dark room, I latched on. Actually, no, I got to go back a little bit more to when I was working for my uncle. He had a book called How to Win Friends and Influence People.
Okay.
And that book changed my life. And I read that book. And I'm like, oh my God, they got books like this? This is so good. And then when I was 20 working in the dark room, the owner and his wife were in Amway. And they brought me to a bunch of Amway meetings. Say what you might about Amway, whatever. They have some pretty good educational materials and books. And I joined Amway for about a year back then. And it latched me onto all these really great resources, books and seminars. So that only lasted a year, but it set the stage for me because, again, I was really, really lost, and I latched onto self-help. I've heard similar stories, much, much more intense stories from other people who have had similar experiences, but they were much more depraved and latching onto self-help books and books like Think and Grow Rich and The Power of Positive Thinking saved their lives. And I can attest to that as well. So people like to, diss it, and they like to diss things like Amway and whatever. Okay, we can talk about that if you want, but it doesn't matter. My experience was that it was really, really beneficial, and it showed me that. So that was something that I can really credit that to. So that gave me, I think, in many ways, a philosophical foundation based on self-improvement and self-help and business success books.
Yes.
And largely because I was so empty inside, and I was looking to be filled. John,
And
you and I do a weekly podcast for photographers, and I've been doing that similar thing for about 22 years now.
Yeah.
It's insatiable. My
Yep.
point being, I'm constantly hungry for that, and that's a driving force behind why I do that sort of thing.
Well, going back to the panic attacks and a little bit of the anxiety, which to this point you really haven't been getting really anxious as much as more panic attacks.
Yeah.
Do you attribute that more to the being put into charge and not knowing what to do, or is it more being in front of a lot of people? What was it that you think was causing the panic attacks?
People. It's been in front of people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So being in front of a group of people and just clamming up, basically.
Yeah. And I remember having to go up this is before I was a school photographer at one of my Amway meetings. You're asked often, do you want to go talk about a product? It's a 3-minute speech. And I'm like, okay, I'll talk about Buff Up, which is their furniture polish.
Yeah.
And I went up to the podium and I just looked down and I froze.
Yeah.
I started hyperventilating. And all I could think about was the door to my left, and I was going to run out the exit.
Yeah. So it's not that the knowledge, I mean, you had the knowledge, you knew what to do. Same with the camera. When your camera wasn't working, you knew how to set that camera up, and you knew that it was probably working fine. But then all of a sudden you got in front of those kids, and all of a sudden, are you thinking about being in front of those kids? And all of a sudden, my camera's not working. Now, did he talk to you afterwards and you were like,
no,
explaining it to him what happened, or he just took it in stride, or what?
Took it in stride. It was weird. People get uncomfortable about stuff like that. Nowadays, they just medicate you. If I'd have been a kid nowadays, I'd be medicated for sure. I'm sure I got ADHD, something like that. Yeah. So, but in that ADHD or what is that Elon Musk has? He has a condition.
Oh, I didn't know he had one.
It's the other one. Richard Branson's got dyslexia.
Yeah.
A lot of high achievers have these conditions, and I was talking about that with that young guy that came by today, and he had a similar story. And I was telling him, I said, you got all of these things can be and are positive attributes. You just got to let them flow into the right direction, and you got to find the right direction. Nobody else can tell you what that direction is. You just got to get out there and try things, kind of follow your heart, so to speak. I don't know what the hell got me into photography. There's no explaining it, John, is there? I mean,
no, just a creative avenue to get out what was inside you. I don't know. Maybe it was to force you to deal with the panic attacks, to force you with your anxiety. So how did you get through that whole thing? What made you go from having panic attacks and knowing that you got
lots of
18 4-year-olds coming, as opposed to getting through it and saying, I can do this, no problem?
Yeah, no, it took a while.
It's not like a light's just going to go on. You got to work a process.
I had to quit drinking, so that was number one.
Yeah.
I had to quit drinking. I had to stop medicating. And throughout my 20s, I was constantly, I was an adult who drank a lot in order to cope. And my ambitions were high. My abilities were low as far as managing my business, my finances, and just having my life put together. And when I was 31 years old, 1991, January 6th, my last drunk was for a photographer who had turned 50, and all the local photographers had a big party to celebrate for Conrad. He loved the 50s era, so we all had to dress up as the 50s, and I dressed up as Buddy Holly. And that was my last drunk. And the next day, I called AA, and the next night I went to my first AA meeting. And that's what changed me. So, you're not supposed to really talk about stuff like that, technically speaking. but people talk about it. It doesn't matter. The fact of the matter is I did it. And it's supposed to be attraction, not promotion. I'm not promoting.
Yeah.
I'm just telling my
No.
story. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And I have absolutely zero shame insofar as that story is concerned. But I actually think it's quite an amazing story. And I've heard from so many other people who had similar experiences. And it all underscores the same sort of idea that I was talking about a while ago. You've got to tap into your strength. And the only way to tap into the strengths is to deal with the inner demons that are plaguing you. If you don't deal with the inner demons, if you don't decide to walk down the road, there's going to be a dragon in the front of the road, and you got to draw your sword and decide to do battle. And that demon, that dragon is your inner demon, and you have to. And it's weird, as soon as I decided to do battle with the dragon disappeared.
Well, it's like anything, like smoking. I mean, you can remember you started when you're around 16 years old drinking. 31, that's 15, 16 years old. 16 years you went. That was your medicine. That was your medicine. That was what you went to. Do you think that's where you said that sometimes that was the drinking was your almost your catalyst, I guess, for your panic attacks? Is it because
it made them worse?
You were afraid people were going to find out about your drinking, or was it more?
I didn't give a shit about that.
Okay.
No, I didn't give a shit about that.
No,
didn't care.
Because I know some people are like that. They're afraid they do stuff and then they don't want to get caught. Like, did you wake up drunk? Was it that bad, or was it just a matter of you just used it to get to sleep at night?
Some bingers were pretty bad, but mostly I was a weekend drunk. So, but I could never not drink on the weekend, every single weekend. I probably thought that was normal.
Yeah.
I know a lot of drunks per se who were daily drinkers. I could never do that. I don't know why. But I was horribly hungover on Sundays and Mondays, often right through till Tuesday, and then I'd start again on Thursday or Friday. But it was how I coped, and I could never have one. Never.
Yeah, and that's the big thing right there.
And I couldn't quit. Quitting is a habit, is usually an indicator. People talk about, I tried to quit and I couldn't quit. I never thought of that until I joined the meetings, and I'd hear these stories from others. I'm like, that's what I was doing. I'm not the only one. And that's a behavior. So think about it. Yep. Why would you be quitting unless it's an issue?
Yes.
Right?
It's true.
People don't just say, I'm gonna quit eating pizza or whatever, or just random things. If they're quitting something, that usually is an indication that it's
a problem.
So I was always trying to quit, and I could never quit. And I smoked really hard too, and I was very compulsive with all of these behaviors. And it all stopped when I walked into those doors and did battle with the demons and the dragon, and I drew my sword and poof, it disappeared. And from that moment on, like, it was scary going into my first meeting, like really, really scary. And I'm certainly glad I did it. If I have any regrets in life, and they're not really major regrets, they are that if I look back, I wish I'd have done that sooner. But I wouldn't have known better. So.
No, exactly. We go through these things for a purpose, I think.
Yeah, because I consider myself somebody who's had a lot of ambition and a lot of potential, and what could have happened, I don't know. But you can't live in the past. You definitely can't live in the past. So that's not a thing. I just sometimes have a little thought experiment once in a while, geez, yeah, if I could live my life over, I'd probably start the studio younger. All the stuff now, John, about running a business. And imagine if you apply that to the stamina and the energy of a 22-year-old, if you had the maturity and the discipline
exactly
to go in there. I mean, you'd be so successful, and probably would have married young and had a larger family, because those were important things to me. But
so when did you start your first studio? You said you were in your 20s. Was it your early 20s, or?
I was 25 years old.
25 years old, and then it was not until like 31 years old when you finally, as you said, slayed the dragon. So you went 6 years running your own business.
Yeah. So money
drinking on the side, going through panic attacks, anxiety, all that stuff, and then all of a sudden, poof! You cut it cold turkey. So how does what happens after that then? Now, did you meet Tina before
she's
went
later.
to AA, or was this way after?
Later. So
okay.
So I Yeah, it's funny how money and prosperity and success has no conscience.
Yeah.
It doesn't care who you are.
Hmm.
You could be a total fool like I was. And, I saw a building with an apartment in it. I thought I'm going to open a studio there. I called it Mr. Photo. Oh.
Hmm.
It was next to a bar called the Laurentian, which was a real skanky bar, but the booze was cheap. We used to go there all the time. Not good. And, I scraped together $150. I put together a sign. And that March, we had a big windstorm. You remember those portable signs with the letters?
Yep.
A lot of those signs got damaged, and you'd see them for sale in the Bargain Hunter. And I bought one for $100, and I put it up in the front. And I was very ambitious in that respect. So I got actually business. In my first year, I think I shot 20 weddings, but I was always struggling because my lifestyle was not healthy. So a year into that studio, I get offered Westmount Photography. There's a couple who had this beautiful house, 3-bedroom house with a 3-bedroom apartment and a studio. And they made me an offer I couldn't refuse in 1986, 85, 86. Okay. And it was called Westmount Photography. And I took it over. And I eventually bought the building. And I sold it. I sold it a year after I bought it because I owed a lot of money. So I sold it and I made a lot of money, and I paid all my debts off. And then it was right after that a year later I sobered up. So, it's hard to run a business long term when you're living that kind of a lifestyle. So I'm glad I quit, because when I quit, I had the discipline, the fortitude, and a totally different outlook on life. It was amazing for me. And I feel sad for those who never tap into that for whatever reason. It's usually pride, ego, and fears that drag a person down, and their addictions get the better of them. So I felt really, really good. There's a thing in the recovery world called the pink cloud, where a certain amount of people who go into recovery, they get really happy. There's like a pink cloud that takes over their life. And I had that I'm going to say I had that still largely. But the first 4 or 5 years, I look back at those years very, very fondly because everything changed for me. And one of the things I did was I joined Toastmasters.
Yep.
I figured if I can go to a meeting and pour out my soul and talk about all my inner demons and all my faults and accept the fact that I'm an alcoholic, if I can do all that, I can go to Toastmasters. I always wanted to be in front of people. I knew that was an issue. And I joined Toastmasters thinking I was going to join for 1 year. I'm going to go in and I'm going to leave. This place is too scary. I ended up staying 11 years, took a bit of a break, and I went back, and I was a member up until COVID. They haven't started the meetings yet. Okay. But I love Toastmasters. Now I go to Toastmasters and I go to AA meetings, and I'm now the old guy. I'm Gandalf. I'm like the old guy, but I was a young guy at one time who had major struggles. And so I went through that whole journey, and these things are not, in my view or experiences, these are not things that are just kind of bestowed upon one and like, here's your gift. You know what I mean? You might have a predisposition to do something. And I think I'm a pretty good public speaker.
Yep. No, I can vouch for that.
Yeah. And that was never the case, John.
No. Not
when I was in my 20s, for sure. And struggled in my 30s when I joined Toastmasters. I had to get good, but I wanted to get good. And it was really, really important to me that I had that ability. For whatever reason. I had to have that ability to communicate. It was almost like my whole life I was so sort of abandoned and left on my own that it was like, well, what about me? This inner child was saying, what about me? I want to be heard too. Maybe that's part of it. I don't know. Doesn't matter. I heard Monty Zucker, who's a world famous photographer. He's passed away a long time ago. You might remember him.
Yep. I know the name. Yep.
Yeah. He was saying at a meeting once, he said that photographers, they have a lack of self-esteem, and that's why they need to take pictures. I mean, he wasn't saying that in a derogatory sense. He was just saying it more admittedly, talking about himself. I mean, we're always looking for affirmation, and we get it through our photography. Yeah, it's not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing. Not a bad thing. Why I got into Toastmasters and really got control of my public speaking.
So when
And
it came to Toastmasters, did somebody ask you, invite you to it, or you just said, you know what, I've heard
no,
of it, I like it, I'm gonna go check it out, and then tell us that first meeting you went to. Like, I'm sure you were terrified.
I was pretty nervous, but don't forget, I was sort of starting this new journey with the pink cloud,
Mm-hmm.
and I felt good. So for the first time in my life, I felt optimistic.
Good.
I never felt that before. I felt optimistic. Yeah, this is cool.
Yep.
And I was scared to death. My knees were knocking, but I had this underlying sort of like exhilaration going on, and
Mhm.
it was a lot of stressful times, but I'm going to say it was a lot of fun too.
Yeah.
I got to the point, and this is me bragging now. And I still say this: if you gave me a topic and said, "Go walk out on that stage, and you got to talk for an hour on that topic in front of 500 random strangers that you've never met," I could do it.
Mhm.
I could do it. I know
I
I
can
could
see
do
you.
it
I can see you doing it. I've known
because
you
I have a
long enough
skill
to know
set.
you could.
I know how to weave together stories and talk in public without having that social anxiety cloud my thinking. That is
Mhm.
gone.
Yep.
I still get anxieties. That's for sure. I was telling my daughter yesterday about that. I said, I still get anxieties. I get anxieties when I'm speaking in front of a group.
Yep.
And I just go, oh, hey, old friend. And it'll go away.
Yep.
And not a panic attack to me is 10 times worse.
Okay.
Way,
Yeah, my
way
daughter
worse.
gets panic attacks, so I know what that's like. I've never had one myself. I've had anxiety, like you say. I think everybody gets anxiety
Yeah, I
in
think
one
it's,
way or another, but I've never had an actual panic attack. So that's why I'm
yeah,
sure there's other people on here that's had the same thing and they're still struggling. So it's nice to hear somebody willing to talk about it. So
panic attacks are awful.
yeah.
And when I went through my bout, they never came back. I never had them again. Well, they kind of lurked there while I was doing the school photography.
Yeah.
They were always like threatening, but then they faded away. And I think as life experiences, now I look back at my life, especially I was able to do this in my 20s. I'd look back at when I went through that phase, and I
Yeah.
always was able to say, good thing I went through that. Because imagine I was working in a dark room,
Yeah.
no social contact. You're like Gollum. You're working in the dark.
Yeah.
Imagine if I would have just crawled back into that shell,
Yeah.
stayed in the dark room forever and ever because I was
Mhm.
too afraid. The person I would have become would have been a completely different person.
Yeah.
So I'm grateful for that inner drive, and all the self-help books help too, and a lot of it, and it probably all helped when I was stepping out the doors of the 12-step meeting, first 12-step meeting I went to,
Mhm.
which changed my life forever and ever. And those were good times.
Yeah.
I
So
was
then
I,
you get sorry?
I was homeless at that time because I had a girlfriend. We had a house together. You ever watch the movie with Mickey Rourke?
I don't know. I don't think I saw any of his older stuff, just stuff when as he got older
Based
himself.
on Charles Bukowski. He was an alcoholic, and his girlfriend was an alcoholic. Barflies.
Oh, Barflies? Okay, yeah.
I remember watching that movie whenever it came out and thinking, that's me. Anyways, my girlfriend, we had a house together, and that was us, two alcoholics. And I left her and I gave her the house. And I was sleeping in my studio floor and that was the period. Shortly after, 3 months later, I sobered up, and I was living in my studio. I had a cushion behind the
Yep.
studio backdrop, and I pulled it out and I slept there for about a good year and a half. But I was filled with optimism.
Mhm.
And Toastmasters, and then I took a few university courses, and then I pulled my credit together and moved the studio to a better location, and I bought a house, and met Tina when I was turning 36 years old.
Okay.
So 5 years later or whatever, and we had a baby right away, and she quit her job as an accountant, and she's almost like a godsend. It was like,
Mhm.
anyone else, my life would have been totally different.
Yeah.
How do you define your life, your identity a lot by your career?
Yeah, in a way. My career and my family. But
But if you were a mailman, you're
Yeah.
not gonna like, I'm a mailman.
No,
It's not,
exactly.
it's not the
Well,
same. Not the diss mailman.
no, exactly. So, in actual fact, you said there was 3 times in your life that you think that, religion hit you with angels and that. Well, actually, it was 4th when you think of it, when Tina came in.
Possibly.
Yeah.
My dad always used to say marriages are made in heaven, and maybe that's the case. But
Yeah.
I also was big into John Bradshaw, the inner child, and he talked about how you attract people at your level. So
Mhm.
Tina and I attracted each other, and it clicked.
That's perfect.
Now, my first date with Tina was after a squash game. We were playing at the YMCA, and it was early July, and I just got a new motorcycle. At that time just became a new rider.
Mhm.
If I'd have been a motorcyclist in my 20s, I'd have killed myself. Guaranteed.
That's
Guaranteed.
yeah.
So I asked her, I said, "Do you want to go out for nachos?" It was a Friday night. And she said, "Yeah." And I said, "Okay, can I pick you up on my motorcycle?" And her eyes lit up and she was like, "Yeah." So that told me at some level she was up for adventure. And I didn't connect the dots till much, much later.
Mhm.
I just asked her, I said, "Can I pick you up on my motorcycle?" It was just a thing. I never thought of it. But had she said, "No, motorcycles scared me," I might have said, "Oh, okay, I'll pick you up in my car and we'll go out." And it might have been our only date.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Mhm.
But the fact that she said yes told me at least at a subconscious level that she was up for the adventure.
Yeah.
I love being on my motorcycle. I still to this day. I took my bike here tonight,
Yeah.
and so we were a good match in that respect. So I always tell my daughter what my Aunt Esther told her 5 years ago, a couple of years before my Aunt Esther died. She was 94 at the time. When she was talking to my daughter, she said, "Don't marry for love. Marry for qualities. Love
Mm.
will come later." It's true. It's true. Well, it
Yeah.
makes sense. Well, you actually, when you think about it, though, it's the qualities that will define the love.
Yeah.
So,
That
but
is true.
and that's what at some level was sort of guiding my relationship with
She was
Tina.
your yin to your to her yang or whatever.
Yeah, and we're a match. So, and that it doesn't mean it's always easy. I
Yeah.
mean, I can be a pain in the ass, but we've had a pretty good run of
Yep.
so far 26 plus years running a photography business, and it's been a whole lot of fun.
Yep.
I remember last year at the end of the season, I was like, well, it's been a pretty good, because the whole COVID thing drove me nuts. We went into lockdown and then open for 7 months, then lockdown even longer, and then
Yeah.
open for 6
And it
months.
plays on you.
Oh, it just really darkened my soul because I'm such a freedom loving guy.
Yeah.
It really, really darkened me. And, but I remember thinking to myself in the studio about December, late November, thinking, yeah, it's been pretty good. I'm so lucky I get to earn a living
Yeah.
taking pictures.
Yep.
I'm taking pictures.
It is. It's a. I never even thought I was going to be a photographer. I never had the ambition until I was in my 20s too, when I dropped out of school, college and
Mhm.
stuff. That's when I became a photographer. So you never know what's going to
It
hit
showed
that
up, didn't
funny
it?
bone, tickle that funny bone, and see what's going to be in there. And but it's okay. So you meet Tina, you guys get married, you have a child. Um,
Boom. It all in 1 year.
does she just say, "That's it, I'm going to help you run your business," and that's why she quit accounting? Or
I asked her, I remember we were driving and I said, "Oh, do you want to keep working?" She was a senior. I just asked her in the car, I said, "Do you want to keep working or are you interested in this helping me with the studio?" Studio.
that's
Like she was
funny.
waiting for me to ask. And
Which
she's
is
amazing.
not easy. I mean, me, I work with my wife here too, and some people they can't handle that because you have your home time and then you have your work time, and trying to
Yeah.
combine them too. They say never mix them; it's never going to work. But somehow you two, over 26, 27 years, have made it work.
And I got to tell you, I think the recipe, and you might want to, I don't know, you're probably more devoted of a family man than I am. I consider myself, it's something I value a lot.
Hmm.
May not matter. I may be full of crap in what I'm about to say, but I think as a antidote or as a sort of like a really good item to include in one's life is a sense of adventure. I'm not talking about sexual adventure here. I'm talking about going out in life and doing stuff together.
Yeah.
My wife and I have traveled a lot together, and we travel really well together. So there might be stuff that you might consider doing with your spouse that is adventurous.
Yeah.
For us, it was that going on. She loves being on the motorcycle. She loves traveling. And I'm not saying that that's what you need to do, but you need to look at, well, what could we do that's adventurous? It could be anything. Going on a hike, going camping, could be anything at all. Could be starting a new business, could be starting an association, a nonprofit, could be anything. Could be joining Toastmasters together. You got to look at things like that, I believe. And it applies. Joseph Campbell said a famous saying, and my first year of sobriety, I took a university course and I discovered Joseph Campbell. And I always remember what he said. He said, follow your bliss.
Mm-hmm.
Follow your bliss. And I love that so much. I actually put it on my license plate. For 5 years, I had YRBLISS. And maybe more, I'm not sure. But throughout the 90s, up until I married Tina, and a few years later, I had that on my license plate because I really believed in it. And it's something that needs one to look at oneself. And you need to be honest. You need to have goals. And you need to have a network of people. You need to have a support group. So you have to be with the right people. So, but my point being that I was living those elements, those principles. I was applying them big time into my life. And it really, really paid off in spades. And then I married and I still kept applying them.
Yeah.
So I think that, I just came up with some wise words for marriage counseling advice.
There you go.
Well, you think about it, self-empowerment, all that stuff. Well, why not apply that to a marriage?
That's very true.
And it could easily be applied with the same principle of Joseph Campbell, follow your bliss, and just go on an adventure, whatever that adventure might be.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if you're in a mismatch, you're going to have problems. So you got to have the same values, same qualities.
No, exactly.
My wife and I have the same values, but we're complete opposites personality-wise.
But I also like your type of person that when you put your mind to something, you're going to go do it. It's actions. It's not just saying you're going to do this. You're a big believer in that 5-year plan type of thing. Yeah. You've always bugged me about it. You got to make that 5-year plan.
You do.
And you're a big believer in that. And then going back and looking at that 5-year plan 5 years later and see if you actually put any of that to action.
Yeah. And goals, I've always played a big part of my life. So, and again, I knew about them. I tried them, but I didn't really work them until I sobered up and started by looking in my own inner demons first. And the goals started working out for me right away.
Yeah.
Right away. It was amazing, absolutely amazing how many things started to show up in my life. Camera systems, cars, houses, opportunities and such. Everything just started unfolding. So if you don't believe in goals, I urge anybody to put your resistance aside and just try it. And the more you can write it out in clarity and visualize it, especially if you can go 5 years and then 1 year and then monthly. And for me, goals also tell you what issues do you have? Because you always got to look at, okay, what are the things that are stopping me?
Yeah.
And you make a list of things that are stopping. What's preventing me? What are my top 10 issues? So when you're writing goals out, you got to write out these issues, and you got to write out anything. And you'll get clarity from that action or that exercise. I've always somehow been blessed with the awareness and that sort of skill set.
Yeah.
And it's been good. It's been really, really good. So
it's great because I look at your past. You talk about your teen years and the troubles that you went into, the struggles through your 20s and into your 30s with your alcohol, things like that. And then not only do you turn it around, but you become a very highly successful photographer in your area. You became a teacher to a lot of us photographers growing up. You gave us a lot of teaching. You became property owners. You not just own your house. You bought all these houses, but you also own buildings now. You're in your own studio. You own and rent out spaces. You live part of the year in Costa Rica with your condo. I mean, This is somebody that if you would have looked back then, you would never have thought any of that was going to happen.
No. Never.
And
And
so,
it almost sounds like I'm a multi-billionaire or a
well, no,
millionaire, but
you're
I'm
a
not.
billionaire in other ways.
You know, we organized everything this way, and you know, yeah, we have a place in Costa Rica, but we don't have a cottage up here, and we have a house and a studio. We have some real estate. I've always liked real estate, so as far as investments are concerned, that's my studio. You just showed it, eh?
Yeah, that was the studio there. Yeah, and you own that building, and
Yeah.
I mean, it just shows that it doesn't matter right now. We only got like probably a few minutes left, so I got a couple. One thing is, looking at you now and looking back at that 16, 17, 18-year-old boy,
Mm-hmm.
what would you say to him now if you could get in a time machine and go all the way back and have a chance to
Yeah.
talk to him? What would be the biggest words of advice for him? Because obviously
Yeah.
back then you're probably pretty pig-headed back then.
Yeah, I almost want to say, what would I tell my 22-year-old self? Because
Mhm.
16, you're still a child, right?
Yep, it's true.
You know, you're still a child.
I think you know everything.
Yeah, and you're just raw, just so raw. No sensibility whatsoever.
But you go to that 19-year-old or 17, whatever it was, where you actually
Yeah.
had jail time, and you get transported into that jail cell with him, and you have a chance to talk to him and try and
Yeah.
what would you say?
I'd say go to AA. Well, because it's all going to stem from there.
Yeah.
And I'll quit drinking, which will cause me to quit smoking, which will cause me to get responsible, start growing up, and it'll start me to get in the community. I'll get around. There's a lot of older men in AA, especially back in those days. Not so much nowadays, but there's you get around older people, and you can. I needed that guidance. I didn't have it. So
that's true.
That one act alone would have set the stage for everything else.
Yeah.
I would have.
And that's the hard part, because back then, things nowadays, mental health is just starting to come to the forefront in the last, say, 5 to 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
It was a stigma back then, of course. I mean, you could never talk about your problems. You had issues like that, they would lock you away just for.
Well, true. And somewhere in the 80s, though, it became sort of vogue, self-help. And John Bradshaw was working on the inner child, and he had a book called Healing the Shame That Binds You, and another book called Your Inner Child. And he was on PBS quite a bit. And they had a big PBS as part of their fundraiser in 1989. And I was watching it. And he was a self-admitted alcoholic. And it's like, oh, geez, people are talking about this openly now. Mm-hmm. And you're right, they weren't before, but it was becoming vogue. So, and throughout the 90s, it almost became trendy. I think it is. You know, it became trendy. A lot of people in Hollywood and famous people, you know, they were getting checked into recovery and going to AA meetings. There's a lot of well-known actors who are in AA. And it's just kind of like a thing. It's like, no big deal. It's just something you do. So what? There's no shame.
No.
Absolutely no shame.
No. Well, I'm glad you were willing to come on and tell everybody about your story, because to me, there's a lot that can be learned from what you went through. And if you can even change one or two people's lives just by explaining your story and having them sit there just like you did in AA, and you looked around and you listened to these people and they're like, wow, that's me. I don't know if you ever heard that Kenny Chesney song that he sings about drinking and stuff like that.
No.
I'll have to get the title of it. But he sings a song almost identical to what you said.
Okay.
And I'll have to get that song for you. And it's a great
country
song. It's a country song, so I know, but just the words themselves.
A lot of drinking in country songs.
Yeah, but yeah, no, very, very good, powerful message, because there's a lot of people out there that'll be going through that and they're like, I don't drink too much. Like, I like to have my glass of wine at night or have a beer or something, but I know when to stop, and I know I'm just having the one or something. But you were at that point, you couldn't, and you even admitted it. You couldn't stop.
You're like my wife. You're a social drinker. You're not plagued by your inner demons, and you got to do battle with those inner demons. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. There's no cheating. There's no shortcut. You could probably try medication, but that's like putting a Band-Aid on a big gaping wound. It's
very true.
So if you got So my advice is to anybody. You know when I talked about goals,
Mhm.
I said you got to look at your messes. If drinking is one of your messes,
Yeah.
or excessive shopping, eating, cussing, beating your kids, whatever, credit
Yeah.
card, gambling, driving like a maniac, we all got issues.
Yeah.
You got to make that list. And if drinking is in there, I mean, just damn, do something about it. It's not
Exactly.
a big deal.
No.
Put your
No, there's
ego
so much
aside.
places you can go to these days that there's almost no excuse not to, but it's hard. I mean, it's hard to admit you need help. So I
Your
think by you
ego,
telling your story,
yeah,
you're showing them that it's not that hard if you really put your mind to it.
your ego is not your amigo, as we say down in Costa Rica.
I love it. I think that's a great place to end it. So I appreciate you coming on. I
Thanks,
know
Johnny.
um, normally we talk about photography all the time and we do our shows together and things like
Tomorrow.
that, but this is nice to get more personal and let people know that everybody's human, and
Mhm.
no matter how far down they are, they can always turn it around if they really put their mind to it.
Yeah.
So I
Thanks.
appreciate you sharing with us.
Much appreciated. It's been a
All right.
blast.
So I'm going to let everybody go now. So thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed this episode with Rob Provencher. If you did not get to see it all, or you want to have somebody else watch it, or you want to watch it again yourself, remember these will be replayed on the Butler's Babble Facebook page and on the YouTube channel. So make sure you go check it out. And remember to join us next month. We have a fabulous young lady that's going to come on here and tell you her story of tragedy and how she turned it around. And I think you're going to love hearing from her, and she's an amazing person. So I hope you all come on back and tell all your friends about it. Until then, remember, if anybody asks, say the butler did it.